Until the day he died, this man led a secret, hunted life. He exposed a network of spies and a trail of treachery and betrayal that changed the course of history. No one has ever seen these pictures of the man behind the mask. Home movies of a life in hiding, shielded by undercover police. He was known as Mr. Brown. His real name is Igor Gouzenko, the man in the mask. The man who launched the Cold War. It is a hot, sultry night in the summer of 1945. Behind steel doors in a guarded room in the Soviet embassy in Ottawa, Igor Gouzenko is earmarking secret documents. Documents he is planning to steal. Gouzenko is a cipher clerk. He codes and decodes the embassy's most closely guarded secrets.
He knows enough in detail that he can demonstrate that Canadian officials, Canadian military officers, Canadian politicians have broken their oaths of office, their oaths of loyalty to Canada, to the Crown. This is simply stunning.
Gouzenko can provide proof that the Soviets are running a network of spies inside Canada and far beyond its borders.
Gouzenko had access to all the traffic, all the cables that went to and from Ottawa to Moscow, also between Ottawa and other Soviet spy nests in North America. And Canada was a very important link in this web.
What he knows, Gouzenko realizes, is enough to get him killed or buy his freedom. He dares confide in no one but his wife, Svetlana.
The thing why we absolutely decided we're going to defect was the fact that only we can do that. Only Igor can take the papers. Only without papers, more likely, no result. And to come with documents, there was only one man, Igor Gouzenko.
Their thoughts of defection come while the world is just rediscovering peace. The Second World War has been over less than a month, and the soldiers are coming home. Prime Minister Mackenzie King is preparing to open the first peacetime parliament in 6 years. It will be his last. After almost 20 years, King is nearly ready to hand over the reins of power. Now, a man he has never heard of is about to force on him one last crisis. For 2 years, Soviet Lieutenant Igor Gouzenko has been posted in the old mansion that serves as the Soviet embassy in Ottawa. With his wife, Svetlana, and their young son, they live in a modest apartment building at 511 Somerset Street. Their life here is a far cry from what they were told to expect when they were sent here by Moscow.
We grew up in this environment of communist propaganda. To our understanding, capitalist world is bad. We come here, we didn't see any concentration camps, reading newspapers in election time, criticizing Prime Minister. Mackenzie King was criticized in newspapers. Well, if in a free Soviet state, Russia, man had a dream that he is criticizing Stalin, he would have a heart attack. That's the difference.
In August 1945, their happiness is cut short by a message from Moscow that will change their lives forever. His boss, the military attaché Nikolai Zapotin, has received new orders for Gouzenko.
Please resettle Gouzenko immediately to the main compound, otherwise you will be responsible for consequences, and please take the measures to ship him immediately to Moscow. But because Gouzenko himself was the person who had the first access to that cable that triggered his defection, he learned that he would be recalled to Moscow pretty soon.
A recall can be a death notice for you, for your family, for your parents, for your aunts and uncles, if it comes to that. So it's a time of trial.
For the Gouzenkos, the only decision left is not whether to defect, but when. They begin planning, talking in whispers in the park across the street, fearing their apartment has been bugged by the embassy.
We thought there would be microphones everywhere. We were expecting microphone being installed in our baby carriage. So when we go for a walk, we would not be audible, even if they hear what we are talking about.
On the night of September 5th, Gouzenko makes his move. His boss has gone to the movies. Gouzenko suggests to his colleagues they do the same. When they get to the theater, Gouzenko tells them he's already seen the movie and they should go on without him. He slips back into the embassy, unlocks the steel doors in the secret room, and stuffs his shirt with the 109 documents he's already earmarked. Then he makes his first call. He takes his story to the local newspaper, the Ottawa Journal, hoping for a front-page story.
If newspaper would put it on the front page, then how come the top secret material is on the street? That would be maximum success for intelligence, Canadian intelligence, and maximum success for our defection.
But at the Ottawa Journal, the night staff is more accustomed to the drunks who wander in from the Belle Claire Hotel next door.
Now, here's a man speaking very bad English and highly excited and claiming he had all sorts of state secrets. And he could have been just a plain nut, and that's the reaction that poor old Chester had, I think.
Chester Froud, the night editor, turns down the story of a lifetime and sends Gouzenko away.
And I think the editor, harassed on a deadline or whatever, thought he was a crackpot. And a lot of a stack of papers that meant absolutely nothing to him in Russian, nobody knew Russian, it's totally understandable. I think that they sent him on his way. It's a great pity for this guy they did it.
Now Gouzenko takes his documents to the Justice Department, where the night commissioner tells him to come back during office hours.
Young officer, I don't know if his identity is known, who was on duty in the evening, and when my husband come and show him the document from National Research Council, top secret. Here this coming young man with the top secret in his hand. What did he tell Igor? Well, it's so late at night I can't reach anybody.
Discouraged and frightened, Gouzenko returns home to Somerset Street knowing he now has only hours before the embassy discovers his theft.
Oh, I think he's becoming hysterical or panicking, terrified.
Had he made a terrible error of judgment? Here he had taken these documents, and now nobody believed him. Nobody seemed to take him seriously.
He knew they were out to get him. They knew they would be killed if they caught him.
So he is faced with what must have been probably the most agonizing moments in his life, waiting for the inevitable knock on the door, being sent back to the Soviet Union, under escort, under guard, and being killed in Lubyanka in Moscow as a traitor.
The next morning, 12 hours after their defection, the Gouzenkos return to the Justice Department. They are told that the minister, Louis Saint-Laurent, refuses to see them, and then they're ushered out. In desperation, they try the Ottawa Journal one more time.
I remember pacing up and down in the library. I was sitting with Mr. Lowry in his office, and a girl, I think her name was Betty Fraser, who was working in the social staff, came in almost in tears. She said, there's a man outside who's threatening to commit suicide. He's going to throw himself out the window if we don't listen to him.
For the second time, the newspaper turns down the story. A reporter suggests they apply for citizenship at the courthouse, and there, finally, a sympathetic ear. Fernand Colson, secretary to the Crown Attorney.
He said that he had some papers to prove to Canada that Canadians were spying and selling secret documents of the country and to Russia. And I realized that this was a serious thing, of course.
Fernand Colson starts making phone calls, first to the RCMP. An officer comes to examine the documents and interview Gouzenko. He tells Colson, the story is probably true, but we can't touch it.
She was very much discouraged and really even startled and wondering and worrying. Why would no one want to listen? This is important. It's not just a small thing, it's a big thing.
Fernand Colson then decides to go directly to the top.
I decided I would call the Prime Minister's office. And his private secretary was Sam Gobet. And he said, give me your phone number and I'll call you back in a few minutes. I said, I did that. So a few minutes later, he called me. And he said, do you want to listen to good advice? I said, what good advice? He said, have nothing more to say and nothing more to do with that man. Kick him out of your office as soon as you can. I said, thank you, and I hung up my telephone, and I was mad.
The Gouzenkos hit another dead end. Fernand Colson watches them leave, fearing they may not survive the night.
I believed what he was saying, and I felt that he should have protection, and Canada should protect that man, because I was afraid if the Russians caught up with him, they would send him back to Russia.
In fact, Prime Minister Mackenzie King had already heard about the man with a sheaf of secret documents in his shirt who claimed to be a Soviet defector. But King was at that moment attending ceremonies for the opening of Parliament and hoping Gouzenko would just disappear.
His first reaction was, what have I done to deserve this? You know, why me? I don't want this guy. You know, can't he commit suicide and we'll then take the papers, send them back? How can we get out of this?
A few blocks away at the Soviet embassy, they're thinking exactly the same thing. By now, Colonel Zapotin knows his cipher clerk is gone and the spy ring is about to be blown. He also knows that unless he can recover the documents, his days are numbered.
But one can imagine what goes on. Panic, shouting, cursing, who was the last person to see Gouzenko, what's in his files, what's missing from his files, where does he live, get some people, get a squad together and get over there quick and find him. What's happened? I'm sure everyone in the embassy sits there and says, oh God, this is my neck, because that's what it means. If there is a defection in an embassy, everyone from the ambassador down to the meanest clerk is in jeopardy of his or her life, simply because they will take the blame for this in some fashion.
That night, 24 hours after stealing out of the embassy, Gouzenko returns home, rejected everywhere, certain of only one thing. If the Soviet military strong arms are not already waiting, they will be hunting him down.
We know the Soviets would come and they will shot us on the spot, and that would be the end of the story.
From their window, the Gouzenkos notice that they are being watched by someone in the park across the street. They take refuge in the next-door neighbor's apartment. Then, just before midnight on September 6th, 24 hours after their defection, the Soviets finally make a move. 4 men from the embassy arrive at their apartment building to arrest them and reclaim the stolen documents. The Gouzenkos watch it all through the keyhole of the neighbor's apartment.
They broke the door because it was only a flimsy little lock, and they push it right through, break the door, and ridiculous idea to think that we would leave the documents. It's a Pavlov oversight. The way that things were, he should have guessed that we would not leave the papers in the apartment. So they start looking through all drawers, mixed up all my knitting for baby clothes and so on, make a mess which looked horrible.
The next-door neighbor calls the police, and the Soviet embassy men are thrown out of the apartment. Then, finally, the Gouzenkos get what they wanted. The RCMP take them into protective custody. They're hustled out of their apartment and told to travel light.
He told me then, take what you need because you would not be coming back here. And I forgot to take the photo picture of my family. All I did, took clothes for a baby, diapers and so on, because that's the first thing I will need, and I didn't take the pictures.
It seems the government had not ignored the Gouzenko's story after all. The man who'd been watching their apartment from the park was an RCMP undercover agent sent to keep an eye on them. That morning, when Justice Minister Saint-Laurent had refused to see them, he made one phone call just in case. The man he called was Norman Robertson, the Undersecretary of State for External Affairs. Robertson did not know much about espionage, but he knew someone who did. At the Royal Ottawa Golf and Country Club, he had a dinner date with the legendary spy master, William Stevenson. The man called Intrepid told Robertson not to let Gouzenko slip through their fingers.
Stevenson is a pro. He's been playing this game at a high level for a long time, and he probably recognizes that this may be something important. After all, what do you have to lose by taking in someone who claims to be a spy? You really have nothing to lose.
And when he put his reputation on the line and said this man has got to be protected, ball game over. There's no more debate.
By that evening, Gouzenko's 109 documents are verified and translated by the RCMP. The evidence is staggering. The Soviets have been running a vast network of spies reaching into almost every level of government. A federal member of parliament is actively working as an agent. There is a spy in the British High Commission. A senior scientist working on the atom bomb project is passing on top secret information, even stealing a sample of enriched uranium from the Chalk River nuclear plant. There are also references to a Soviet agent deep inside the U.S. State Department.
Now it turns out that some Canadians had a different loyalty, or a higher loyalty than the loyalty to their own nation, and loyalty to the Allied cause. They had a loyalty to the Soviets, to international communism.
But even when Norman Robertson confronts him with the evidence, the Prime Minister is in a state of denial.
Mackenzie King would not accept that good Mr. Stalin would do such a thing. To us, Canadian behavior at the time was ridiculous.
Mackenzie King had fallen for the propaganda his own government had been funding the National Film Board to make.
To a Europe already beneath the heel of the conqueror, the new Russia sent a message of hope. Our task is to pull poverty and darkness and slavery out by the roots. Herein lies...
The politicians, they didn't want to confront the reality of what the Soviet Union really was.
One for all, and all for one.
And they thought it was going to be a brave new world. And the Soviet Union was our ally in this campaign against Hitler. Hitler was the great enemy of everything that mankind or democratically holds dear. And by his defeat, virtue had triumphed. And we didn't want to hear anything bad about our great ally, whom we felt a tremendous sense of gratitude towards.
Reports of Russian bravery stirred the hearts of free men everywhere. English workingmen...
For years, Canadians had been urged by their leaders to embrace the Soviet Union as a partner and crucial wartime ally.
And today, across the vast spaces of steppe and tundra, the men and women of the new Russia are reading the message which the Red Star, shining from the smoky windows of giant munitions plants, sends forth into the night. We are strong because we have the faith.
Canadians everywhere took the message to heart.
If you were at work in the war industry, you redoubled your effort to make the tanks and the planes that would go to the Soviet Union. There was a very, very strong feeling that, by God, we've got a real successful alliance here that's going to help win the war.
Gordon Lunan believed it all so deeply, he crossed the line and became a spy. In 1945, while he was still a captain in the Canadian Army, Gordon Lunan began passing classified information to the Soviets. His first contact was Colonel Vasily Rogov from the staff of the military attaché.
Well, it was a very brief meeting in a car, short conversation with him, and handed me an envelope and said, read this and destroy it. And it showed a diagram of 4 people, myself and 3 other people, none of whom I knew at the time. And apparently I was to sound these people out to see whether they were in a position to or were willing to provide certain information.
Before he knew it, Lunan had graduated from communist sympathizer to contact man for a string of agents in the National Research Council and the Army. He was soon in over his head.
Well, almost from the beginning, I was in deeper than I bargained for. You know, there's at a certain point, you can't backpedal. Even if you say that's enough, you're in so deep that if you go in a little deeper, it doesn't make any difference.
But if Lunan was an amateur in too deep, the men who'd recruited him knew exactly what game they were playing. Fred Rose, the Communist Member of Parliament, and Sam Carr, chief organizer for the Canadian Communist Party, took their orders from Moscow.
Whatever Moscow wants, they do. And Moscow wants atomic research, it wants scientific research, it wants detail on individuals, it wants detail on Canadian military planning for the post-war, it wants detail on everything it can get. All intelligence is grist for the mill, and Carr and Rose are in the business of providing that.
Now, back at the Soviet embassy, Colonel Zabotin is forced to call Rose and Carr with the disastrous news. Their files are in the hands of the RCMP, and their agents are blown.
Fred Rose invited himself to dinner, and at dinner he told me. I can still remember his words. He said, "One of the Ruskies has flown the coop." Those were his words. And he was very casual, obviously scared pitless, himself, but trying not to show it and trying not to pass any of that on to me. But I knew right away,
Lunan now discovers that he's being tailed by undercover Mounties.
I'm walking up the street to walk to my home, to my digs, and I suddenly have the feeling I'm being followed. So I do an abrupt about turn, and I walk very quickly back, and sure enough, there are two guys. Obviously, I was under surveillance, and sooner or later, I was certain something would break.
But nothing happens yet. No knock on the door, no news in the papers. Mackenzie King has clamped a lid on the story. So far, he's told no one, not even his own cabinet.
What King is facing here, as he sees it instantly, and he's not wholly wrong, is the end of the wartime alliance. If we show that there is Soviet spying in Canada, if the Russians aren't what they have seemed to be, our friends, then I, Mackenzie King, then Canada could be responsible for precipitating a new world war. That's a terrible responsibility for a Canadian leader.
2 days after their defection, King orders the RCMP to get the Gouzenkos out of Ottawa. Gouzenko took home movies of their life under police protection. Their move from cottages to motels, and finally to a safe house near Toronto. As Gouzenko is further debriefed, news reaches King that the situation is even worse than he thought. King turns to his allies. He goes to Washington to tell U.S. President Harry Truman that the secrets of his atom bomb have been leaked. Truman agrees to send agents from the FBI to help with the investigation. Then King reveals the story to British Prime Minister Clement Attlee. The three leaders agree to do nothing yet. But the case of Igor Gouzenko is about to explode beneath them. Winter comes to Ottawa. And the new year, 1946, is celebrated, and still the spy story has not broken. Then finally, on the night of February 4th, 5 months after Gouzenko's defection, it springs a leak.
This is Drew Pearson with a flash from Washington. A Soviet agent surrendered some time ago to Canadian authorities and confessed a gigantic Russian espionage
And it's not until a leak in Washington by Drew Pearson, an American gossip columnist with good sources, probably to the FBI, so a leak that says that there is some kind of spy ring operating in Canada by the Soviets, that Mackenzie King moves into action at all. And then the government moves with force and ruthlessness.
The next morning, King tells his astonished cabinet for the first time the details of the Gouzenko affair. He also tells them he's had the papers drawn up for a royal commission of inquiry. In secret, the commission moves quickly. It examines Gouzenko's stolen documents and hears his testimony. Within a few days, King is told there's enough evidence to arrest 12 men and women. The RCMP wants to strike in the middle of the night. But Norman Robertson cautions that's just what the Russians would do, and the Mounties are ordered to wait until breakfast time. At 6 a.m., February 15th, a dozen RCMP squad cars and 44 officers set out to make the arrests. Within hours, the story is flashed around the world. Among those picked up are Dr. Raymond Boyer, an explosives expert in the National Research Council, Emma Woykin, a code clerk in External Affairs, and Kay Wilshire, Deputy Registrar in the British High Commission. Gordon Lunan learns his fate during a stopover on his flight back from London.
We got out and landed at Goose Bay, and while in the cafeteria there getting a coffee, on the radio came the announcement that these arrests had been made and that an army officer was among those arrested. So I plainly understood then that I could only be that one person.
Lunan is picked up when he lands in Montreal and driven to the RCMP barracks in Ottawa. Even though he's not formally charged with anything, he's not allowed to call his family or his lawyer.
And I was put into a large dormitory with about 12 to 15 beds, I guess. Put into one bed, solitary occupant, except for a guard, a flatulent guard. He would lift his leg and let go with noisy farts, which he found very amusing. And the light was on 24 hours a day.
When he's questioned by the RCMP, Lunan at first says nothing. But finally, under relentless pressure from the interrogator, he cracks.
He pulls out a stack of documents from a drawer, many of them in my handwriting, and some in my typewritten by me. Faced with that, I had to make a very quick decision. Do I just say nothing and let them proceed the way they can, whatever way they can, or do I try to justify these documents? And I think I mistakenly and naively tried to justify them.
The others in the spy ring are interrogated in similar fashion. When they are hauled up before the Royal Commission, they are again denied their basic civil liberties. Most of the suspects are terrified. Kay Wilshire, the clerk from the British High Commission, is frightened that she will be shot for espionage.
We have, we believe, people who are under orders of the Communist Party and who, if ordered not to talk, won't talk. So the state, in effect, says we will use all of the powers at our disposal and we will deny these people habeas corpus and we will wheel them up in front of the Royal Commission and press them to answer and threaten them with contempt if they don't answer, and if necessary, incriminate them out of their own words. And that is, in fact, what we do.
The treatment of the suspects, the denial of their basic rights of citizenship, becomes a cause célèbre among civil libertarians. Even Mackenzie King is worried that the Royal Commission is behaving like a Soviet star chamber. The commission is headed by two Supreme Court justices, Kellogg and Taschereau, and they are pushing the special powers of their inquiry to the limit.
I asked Justice Kellogg, when I sat down before him in the Royal Commission, I would like to know what rights I have. And he said, it is not your function to ask questions. We will ask all the questions.
But the public is dazzled by the daily headlines and has little sympathy for the so-called atomic spies. Gouzenko has helped to usher in a new and terrifying era. The Cold War has begun. When the spies finally go on trial in Ottawa and Montreal, the atmosphere is electric. Newspaper reporters and newsreels jam the courthouse and stake out the police station. Canada is suddenly the focus of the world's attention. Igor Gouzenko is repeatedly called from hiding to testify. The government's star witness is guarded on his trips to court by 4 RCMP undercover agents. Gouzenko is by all accounts the perfect witness for the prosecution, credible and unwavering. The suspects cannot be charged with treason because the Soviet Union is not an enemy but still an ally. Instead, they're charged with violations of the Official Secrets Act. Only half of them are finally convicted, in most cases by confessions given without the benefit of counsel.
Others were tougher and simply stood up to the Royal Commission and told it to go to hell, and demanded legal counsel and simply refused to speak. And as it happened, the ones who were tough effectively got off. The ones who cracked and talked, they were the ones who were punished.
Gordon Lunan and 2 of the others in his group get between 4 and 5 years. The 2 women, Kay Wilshire from the British Embassy and Emma Woykin from External Affairs, are sentenced to 3 years each. Alan Nunn May, the British scientist working in Canada on the atomic energy project, is tried in England. His trial is over in a single day, and he's sentenced to 10 years. In Canada, Fred Rose and Sam Carr get the harshest sentences, 6 years. But the impact of Igor Gouzenko's revelations will go beyond a handful of convictions and far beyond Canada's borders. Long before his story exploded on the world, Gouzenko's revelations claimed their first victim. When Stalin learns of the defection, Gouzenko's boss, the military attaché Zapotin, is ordered to board a freighter and return to Moscow. First he is sent to prison camp, then his wife and his son. Stalin is forced to clean out his embassies in North America. Gouzenko has dealt Soviet intelligence a major blow.
So we see the continuous decline of Soviet intelligence operations in North America, starting with Gouzenko affair. So by the end of the 50s, the Soviets ended up with no significant assets. They didn't have any meaningful agents. The damage was very big.
Gouzenko's evidence suggested the Soviets had infiltrated not only the Canadian, but the U.S. government as well.
The trial of Alger Hiss was the great espionage drama of 1948.
He helped point the finger at Alger Hiss, a high-ranking official in the State Department accused of treason. Gouzenko's knowledge of Soviet codes also helped the FBI to crack Operation Candy, the Soviet efforts to steal the secrets of the atom bomb.
We all feel that we made some very bad mistakes and that we were deluded to some extent about the Soviet Union. We didn't learn the true facts until much later. But it wasn't the Soviet Union that we were in the movement for. It was humanity. It was our own Canadian people. It was the worldwide feeling of coming to one world.
After serving nearly 5 years in prison, Gordon Lunin found work in an advertising agency. Fred Rose, the man who'd recruited him, returned to Poland after prison. He never came back to Canada.
May Day brings a wave of anti-communist sentiment as 100,000 march down New York's Fifth Avenue in a loyalty parade.
The crusade for freedom is your chance and mine to fight communism.
After Gouzenko, for the next half-century, the Soviet Union is viewed with fear and suspicion. And as the Red Army sweeps across Eastern Europe, it breeds a hatred of communism.
And believe me, men, that means war on all fronts.
Communists don't want war. War would be world suicide.
Why don't you go live in a communist country then? If they're so honest.
Suspicion turns to hysteria.
Funny thing is, people like her never go to live in any of those countries.
As for Igor Gouzenko, fear became a companion for life. Even an innocent family outing to Niagara Falls had to be arranged under the watchful eyes of his police shadows. He lived in hiding under an assumed name for the rest of his days. Ultimately, the freedom that motivated his defection somehow eluded him.
Well, we survive, we live. We work, darn work hard to make living. When you're asking, was it worth? Personally, yes, we had a Canadian life like with extreme difficulties because Igor could be shot.
There was an order to find and eliminate the defector, and that order had no time limit. So that means that a person could be found and liquidated years after he defected.
But his obsession with Soviet espionage would not allow him to disappear into obscurity. He had many friends in the media, but he never dropped the cover name.
And he went by the name of Brown. And I'd be sitting at my desk and the switchboard would say, you know, Peter, there's a Mr. Brown here to see you. He would never make an appointment. He'd come in unannounced. And I would say, oh, well, tell him I'm Mr. Brown. I said, well, that's all right. I'll be Mr. Brown, you know, Igor Gouzenko. And so everybody in the newsroom knew who Mr. Brown was. And so then you'd have to go off in secret and have a little meeting with Mr. Brown. Everybody knew him backwards. And when he died, I was about the only outsider with the family around there, just family, kept the charade up of Mr. Brown. And it was a really surrealistic experience having this funeral for Mr. Brown, who was, then we went off, had the funeral procession was at about 60 miles an hour, so it was not to attract attention, which, racing down the Queen Elizabeth with all the little flags flying off, screaming around corners into the cemetery. It was like Monty Python. It was very amusing from this end. And they quickly buried him and went there. And to this day, I understand, he has no tombstone up because the family would like this tombstone to be erected to Igor Gouzenko. But it can't be, because as far as the graveyard knows, it's Mr. Brown, Peter Brown. So he's got an empty tombstone. He still can't get his name on his own memorial because officially he's somebody else.
Igor Gouzenko's death, like most of his life, was shrouded in secrecy. In the end, the man who fired the opening shot of the Cold War was imprisoned by it.